I'm 29 years old, and recently my mom called me after nearly 5 years of no contact. She told me my help was needed because my sister Melissa and her husband had just experienced something terrible. Some background: Melissa, who is 27, is now married to a man who was once supposed to be my husband. His name is Lucas, and we had been together since college. Lucas proposed to me after almost 5 years of dating, and he threw a surprise party for us on the night of our engagement. I was overjoyed until around 11 p.m. when I went into the backyard for better phone reception and caught Lucas and Melissa kissing passionately. They were so into each other that at first, they didn't even notice me standing there in shock. I couldn't believe Lucas would betray me like that after almost 5 years together, especially on our engagement night. When they finally noticed me, they quickly pulled apart, but the damage was done. I ran to my car, drove to the nearest hotel, and tried to process what I had seen. Then Melissa texted me, apologizing but saying she loved Lucas and that this had been going on for a long time. I was in my hotel room when I got that text, and it broke me down completely. Shortly after Melissa, Lucas texted me with a similar message. He admitted he only proposed to me hoping it would help him forget Melissa, but it didn't work. He said their love was undeniable and he saw me as a temporary distraction. It was devastating to hear. I stayed in the hotel for a few days, trying to gather myself and convince myself it was all a bad dream. After almost 4 days, I went home because I needed to sort things out and get back to work. When I returned, I found out my family had been living with Lucas the whole time, waiting for me. It would have been heartwarming if not for the circumstances of my departure. Everyone had tried to reach out to me while I was gone, but I hadn't responded to anyone. So when I finally showed up, it was chaos. Everyone greeted me warmly when I returned home, even Melissa. She hugged me tearfully, but I was too overwhelmed to react. After the initial chaos settled, I told them I was back only to gather my things and leave for good. Lucas had been quiet until then, but when I mentioned moving out, he spoke up. He said there was no need for me to leave because he had already packed his things. He planned to move in with Melissa now that everything was out in the open. When I returned home, my family seemed oddly cheerful despite the painful situation. They were all smiling, even though I couldn't find anything to smile about. Melissa and Lucas stood together awkwardly, looking sad yet smiling. I couldn't hold back anymore and asked my family why they were smiling. To me, Melissa had just ruined my engagement and taken away my boyfriend of nearly 5 years. There was nothing funny or sweet about it. My mother spoke up then, saying they couldn't change the past but could accept the future. They believed Melissa and Lucas were meant to be together, despite how their relationship started with cheating. They expressed regret but hoped I could understand and accept that this was the best outcome. Melissa apologized tearfully for falling in love with my boyfriend and wished she could have told me sooner. They claimed they were deeply in love and wanted to be together forever. Then, right in front of me, they kissed. My mother even wiped a tear away. I couldn't handle it anymore and told them their behavior was disgusting, not sentimental. To my surprise, my family got annoyed with me. They said I was being bratty and making it all about myself instead of being happy for my sister. I was shocked and demanded everyone leave my house. I couldn't believe they were defending Melissa and Lucas and making me out to be the bad one. My father even told me to stop acting like a child and accept what had happened. They acted like I should celebrate my sister finding her soulmate instead of feeling hurt and betrayed. It was all too much for me to handle. So I decided to forget it all. I went into my room, packed a few things, and left without saying a word or listening to their pleas. They called after me, asking me to stay, but I had nothing more to say. It was painfully obvious that they cared more about Melissa's happiness than about me or what was fair. They were so focused on justifying Melissa's actions that they forgot I had feelings too. After that day, my family tried reaching out to me multiple times, but I ignored them because I didn't feel they deserved a response. A few weeks later, I received an invitation to Melissa and Lucas's wedding, which I declined. Many of our mutual friends also declined in support of me, and some relatives distanced themselves from my family after learning how they treated me. It's been 5 years now, and I've mostly cut them out of my life completely. Occasionally, they've tried to reconnect by sending birthday or New Year wishes, but I've always ignored them. I didn't block them, but I removed them from my social media to keep my life private. I wanted them to see that I was doing well and perhaps feel jealous. It was petty, but it felt justified after what happened. Until recently, I hadn't kept up with what they were doing. About 4 days ago, my mother called from an unknown number. I almost hung up, but she begged for a chance to talk because they were in urgent need of help. I agreed to talk to her briefly because she sounded genuinely distressed, and I couldn't ignore her in that moment. She explained that Melissa and Lucas had started their own business a few years ago, but it was failing miserably. Their investors were pulling out because the business wasn't making any profit. They tried borrowing more money, but that only worsened their financial situation. Now they were drowning in debt and being chased by loan sharks. Everyone, from their employees to their investors and lenders, was pressuring them. My mother knew I lived a comfortable life and was desperate, so she turned to me as a last hope. She begged me to loan Melissa and Lucas around $75,000 to help them clear their debts. So my mother was asking for help on behalf of Melissa and Lucas. I questioned why Melissa herself didn't reach out and why my mother was acting as a messenger. She explained that Melissa and Lucas didn't want her to involve me directly, likely because of what happened 5 years ago. Melissa wasn't ready to accept help from me, but my mother didn't know anyone else who could provide such a large sum quickly. Months had passed and Melissa and Lucas were struggling to make ends meet. My parents and even Lucas's family were doing all they could to support them, but it wasn't enough. Everyone had to think about their own financial security, especially since most in our family were retired, including Lucas's parents. With no other options, my mother called me for help. I could afford to help them, but I didn't want to. Melissa was right not to ask me directly for help. After what they did, they lost any right to make demands from me. I told my mother I couldn't and wouldn't help Melissa and Lucas. She was upset and said I was being cruel, urging me to think about our family. I pointed out that Melissa and Lucas hadn't thought about me during their affair, and our family hadn't considered me when supporting them. I had worked hard for my current position and wasn't going to give $75,000 to people who didn't deserve it. My mother started crying, accusing me of being selfish. She warned that Melissa and Lucas would face serious trouble without my help. I replied that I couldn't change my mind and ended the call. Since then, my mom has been texting me nonstop, begging me to change my mind and help my sister. She says I shouldn't seek revenge and that Melissa's situation is dire. If I don't help now, I might regret it later. It's really overwhelming, and I don't know how to respond without feeling like the bad guy. Am I wrong for not wanting to financially support my sister after she stole my fiancé 5 years ago? Update. So I finally decided to block my family. I should have done it years ago, but I kept them around partly so they could see what I was up to and partly out of fear that I might regret cutting them off if something bad happened to them. Now I realize I don't care anymore. Refusing to help my sister financially isn't about being petty, it's practical. They've already wasted a lot of money, and even if I gave them $75,000 now, I doubt they could pay it back. It's a substantial sum, and even with my resources, it's not something I can give away without expecting repayment. If it were a close friend, I'd expect the same. I talked to some friends about it, and they agreed that not giving them money was the right call. It's not about revenge, but about being realistic. Now that I've blocked my mother, I don't have to deal with her trying to guilt-trip me anymore, so I feel relieved. Update 2. Hey everyone, something major happened today. While I was at work, my neighbor called to say there was a couple outside my house causing a scene and demanding to talk to me. They'd been at it for about an hour. Reluctant to leave work, I asked my neighbor to describe them. Deep down, I already knew who it was. She described them, and it was confirmed. They were Melissa and Lucas waiting for me at home. My neighbor insisted I come home to handle the situation as she didn't trust that Melissa and Lucas were up to any good. Given their history, I agreed. I thanked her and drove home immediately, not wanting to risk them getting inside my house. When I arrived about 15 minutes later, I found them trying to pick the lock. I pulled up and demanded to know what they thought they were doing. I attempted to call the police, but Lucas quickly knocked the phone out of my hand. Melissa approached and claimed they just wanted to talk, and weren't there to take anything, at least not at that moment. I told them to speak quickly and made it clear they wouldn't be coming inside. They agreed to talk in the yard, which was a relief since inviting them in didn't seem safe given their apparent hostility. I told them to make it quick and that they shouldn't expect me to invite them inside. They agreed to talk in the yard, which was a relief given their hostility. Melissa began by saying my mother had informed her about our phone call and how I had ignored their texts and blocked them all. She accused me of being unfair, saying it had been 5 years and I should be over it by now. She claimed I was acting out for attention and said she felt insulted by my refusal to help them. That's why she was there to talk. Melissa explained that she had managed to get the money for now by selling their house and jewelry, but there was a strong chance she might need more in the future. She wanted to ensure she could rely on me for help if needed. I told her that no, she couldn't count on me for anything because I hated her and her husband with a passion. I was so angry that I said it was taking a lot of restraint not to hit her, so they should leave. Lucas then demanded I sign a document promising to give them money in the future. I told them they were insane if they thought they could manipulate me into signing anything under pressure. I demanded they get out, but Melissa pushed me and said I owed them because they were family. I was shocked and nearly slapped her but controlled myself, knowing violence would only make things worse. Instead, I grabbed my phone from the ground, got into my car, and drove off quickly. Since I had left the engine running, it didn't take long to get a head start. They didn't chase me on foot but stayed at my house, which was unfortunate. As soon as I was a safe distance away, I called the police and explained the situation. I then drove back home, arriving just before the police did. Within 20 minutes, I told them everything, and they arrested Melissa and Lucas. I knew the charges weren't severe, so they'd probably get off easily, but at least they were taken away, and I didn't have to deal with them anymore. It's been a few hours and I haven't heard from anyone in my family. I expected at least one of them to try contacting me from a different number, but they haven't. Maybe they've given up on trying to get under my skin, or they're waiting for things to calm down before reaching out again. Either way, it's been strangely quiet. Update 3. Hi everyone. So the last update was about a week ago. I had started to believe that my family would leave me alone after I called the cops on Melissa and Lucas, but I was wrong. This time it was my parents who showed up at my house, asking to speak to me. This happened yesterday and they seemed a lot less arrogant than Melissa and Lucas, so I let them in. As soon as my mother entered the house, she started crying and apologized for taking Melissa's side over mine. My father explained that after they learned about Melissa and Lucas getting arrested and physically pushing me, they couldn't look at them the same way and decided to cut them off. My mother continued to cry while my father admitted they were wrong for siding with Melissa in the past when I was the real victim. I told them that while I appreciated their apology and them finally coming to their senses, it was too little, too late. I was now used to living my life on my own terms and didn't want to go back to putting my family before myself. So even though I appreciated their visit and apology, I couldn't promise to work on our relationship. I felt there was no point in trying to salvage something that was already ruined, even if it was with my parents. They tried to convince me that we could fix things if we wanted to, but that was the problem. I didn't want to anymore. I just wanted to be by myself. I told them I respected their efforts, but I was done. They seemed a bit disappointed, but eventually they left and asked if I could at least unblock them so we could keep in touch. I have unblocked my parents, which feels weird, but that's it.